Welcome to Sigma Tech. Today we shall be discussing Workbench and its appliances. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define Workbench, state various Workbench appliances, highlight types of Workbench, and state factors to consider when designing a Workbench. Okay, you know that every profession, like your mother, for example, who cooks in your kitchen, has a table where she chops her vegetables and the rest of it. Same as every other professional, the people in the mechanical shop, they have a table where they normally will put whatever they want to repair, be the piston, they want to fix rings, they have where they place these things to do their work. So it is for a technologist too, who wishes to either work on metals or work on wood, will also have a workbench where he will place his work either to repair them or to fabricate new ones. So what exactly do we mean when we say workbench? A workbench is a table on which manual jobs as well as tools are supported for construction or repairs. So that's the platform, a table where you can put where manual job is done, where you can place the job you want to work on, right? Either you want to repair it or you want to construct a new one. Oftentimes we have these workbenches in various sizes, right? They're usually rectangular, they can come in different sizes, 2 by 0.8 by 0.9, depending on the workbench. So when we say 2 by 0.8 by 0.9, then I trust you understand what we mean by that. We have length as breadth times height, because we're talking about a rectangle here in this case. So most workbenches, they occur with that dimensions. Okay, now there are different appliances that we have on the workbench. We don't just have the workbench bed. There are different things that we have on the workbench to help the technologists who maybe wants to fabricate a stool, or wants to fabricate a bench, wants to fabricate a table, a cupboard, anything that the technologists want to build. There are different appliances we have. Aside the rectangular table we also have other things like the well. The workbench, normally we have a depression on the surface of the workbench. Depression, kind of, that the workbench is depressed, like you're seeing here on this picture. You can see the well here. Can you see the depression? This is our depression. In this well, basically, that's where we put the tools. The tools, maybe you want to join pieces of wood, and you can have your hammer put there. You can have your saw, you can have the nails in there. You can have so many things you want to do put in the well, so that you can easily pick them up and use them whenever you want to use them on the workpiece you're working on. So that sometimes you can have this well at the end, sometimes you can have it at the middle of the workbench, depending on the design of the workbench. Okay, so we have another appliance we have on the workbench, which is called the workbench vise. This vise is a holding tool. Basically, it's basically used, for holding jobs securely whenever you are working on the workbench. Now, like you see here, normally we can have this bench vise, we can have this one. Okay, here we can have another bench vise, some other place, depending on what you want to do. So, for example, you want to plane a wood, or you want to cut wood, for example. In the local setting, in the villages where some of them don't have this vise, some carpenters will use their leg to hold the piece of wood they want to maybe plane or they want to cut. So, but the right tool to be used for such purpose is the bench vise. And this vise, you can see different parts of the vise. The vise you see has two jaws. We have one here is stationary, while the other one is movable. Of course, this is the handle. In this handle, we have the screw, the anvil or the slide, depending on what you call it. Okay, so all you need to do is turn. As you turn the handle, as you turn it, the jaw either moves forward. All right, as that moves forward, we have the spindle anyway that moves the slide or the anvil, depending on the design of the vise. Okay, we also have the base where the vise is fixed, the fixed body. Now, as you turn, all right, the movable jaw will shift this way. As you turn in the clockwise direction, it will move forward, meaning it wants to close up, and maybe hold on the workpiece that you want it to hold for you there before you can perform certain functions on the workpiece, like planing, like cutting, and so on and so forth you wish to do on the workshop bench, on the workbench. Okay, we also have another bench appliance, workbench appliance we call the bench stop. Now in this case, the bench stop is a small piece of wood, like you can see here. Basically, it can be metallic, though, but in this case, it's a wooden bench stop we're seeing here. Now, basically, the bench stop helps to prevent the jobs we're working on from slipping off the bench, especially when we're planning the work. Let's say you wish to plan a plank, for example. All you need to do is to make it align with the bench stop, so that even as you slide the plane on it, the workpiece you are working on will not slide off the bench. Of course, when that happens, it could cause accident, it could cause injury, it could damage the plane that you're using for such purpose. So the bench stop here performs that function of preventing jobs from slipping off the bench when you are actually working on that workpiece. We also have another workbench appliance we call the bench hook. The bench hook here sometimes designed around the edge, around the edge of the workbench this way. That's the bench hook. Basically, what this does is to ensure that the workpiece is held in place when either you are chiseling or you are cutting on the workbench. Now, also the bench hook there also helps to ensure that when you are cutting on the surface of the workbench, that you don't deface it, like you don't have marks on it. It's still as plain as you met it before you started using it. So basically, that's what we use the bench hook for, that purpose. Okay, we also have another tool we call the bench hold fast, an appliance that we also find on the workbench called the bench hold fast. This bench hold fast, like you see here, is basically used to hold wood on top of the surface of the workbench. Let's say you want to hold it in place, you can use the bench hold fast to actually pin down on the wood before you can perform such another marking out on the wood or maybe chiseling on the wood. The bench hold fast also helps to do that. Alright, there are different types of workbench. There are different types of workbench depending on what we want to use them for. We have a workbench that we call a multipurpose or portable workbench. From the name you can tell what it is. Okay, so multipurpose workbench can be used to do a wide range of manual jobs. You can use them for different purposes. They are usually small, they can be carried from one place to another. Okay, so In this workbench, we normally will have a clamp built in them. Normally, you have clamps on them. When I say clamp, I hope you understand what I mean. A clamp is a holding tool. We have different types of clamp. We have the F clamp, we have the G clamp. The G clamp is one of the simplest form. Yes, the G clamp is very common in the laboratory. It's very common. You can just use it to hold material or hold a workpiece you want to work on. Alright? We have the F clamp. Basically, when you want to join pieces of wood together, let's say you want to fabricate door, for example, it is the F clamp that will help you to hold the pieces of wood after you've applied adhesives or you just stack them. Normally, at the end of it, you see the work pieces, glued together like that. So that's the major function of the clamps. All right, we have another type of workbench that we call the woodworking workbench. Of course, you can see obviously that this workbench on the screen here is specifically for woodwork. So this workbench is used for woodwork purposes. If you wish to blend, it's on this workbench that you have it. They are made of solid wood, made of solid and hard wood. They don't easily degrade, because you will not be changing your workbench every year. So it has to be done with hard wood so that it has a long lifespan with you. Okay. Now, in this we have different aspects. You can see different things we have here on the bench, on the woodworking bench. You can have, in this case, this is where the carpenter places his tools. You can see that. You can see the hold fast, as the case may be. You can see the bench stop here, depending on what he's doing on this particular workbench. You can see the bench stop. You can see the weld somewhere there. Okay. Now we also have another type of workbench that we call the metal workbench. Now every metal fabrication is done on this bench, be it grinding, be it welding, be it casting, be it forging, is done on the metal workbench. Of course, it's metallic. You cannot be using a wood workbench for metal work. When you do that, it will not take longer. The workbench will damage if it's wooden, because majority of the work you're doing, they are strong and they are strong work. Now, this workbench also has a vise. In this case, you can see the vise, the same function that I showed you the workbench vise performs. That is what this vise here performs. It's a holding tool. So when they want to hold a workpiece, maybe they want to cut it. They want to cut a metal, maybe metal sheets, metal rod. It's difficult for you to have a clean of a metal rod and maybe try cutting them with your hacksaw. It's difficult for you to do that. But when you have them on the vise there, okay, you have them clawed on the vise, you can easily work on it with less stress. Alright, we also have another type of workbench we call the gardening workbench. Basically, most agricultural operations are carried out on this workbench. Examples like seeding, like potting, like you want to groom, even a whole lot of other things gardeners do. They want to do the nursery, they want to graft, and so on and so forth. On this table, they can carry out those functions. They can carry out those functions on this table, right? Now, usually they have a storage and a shelf, usually this table, where you can store these things, alright? Now, a gardening workbench should not be one that is exposed, to dirt, alright? It's also resistant to moisture. You understand? Yeah. It should be resistant to moisture. It should not be exposed to dirt. It should not be exposed, you know, to adverse conditions because of the seedlings you may have, on them, or maybe you are working on. Okay, we also have another kind of workbench we call electronic workbench. In this workbench, all electronic jobs are carried out on this job, be it repair, be it fabrication, they are carried out on this workbench. Here you have different tools for that, different tools for electronics, the soldering is carried out on that place, alright? Tightening, everything, repairs, they are all carried out on this workbench that we see here. This is electronic workbench. Okay, we also have another kind of workbench we call the software workbench. Right? The software workbench, like you see, they are used for placing and connecting data sources, operations, and models. That's what this workbench is basically used for. Now, when you want to build a workbench, there are different factors that you must put into consideration before you can build your own workbench. For example, you have to consider the height, the comfortable height of the workbench. Imagine we have a short man that has a very tall workbench. It's not going to work. How will you work on a workbench that is taller than you are? So you have to put in a comfortable height where you can actually work on it, where you can place your job and do your fabrication and repairs on the workbench. You don't just construct. You must take these things into consideration. Number two, you must also consider the provision for mounting and storing and other accessories. You must consider. You don't have your workbench just affixed to the wall because you need to walk around and perform other functions right there in your workbench. Right? You also have to consider where you can access your tools easily and so on and so forth. Okay? So you also will have to fix your workbench in a way that you can stay this side and the other side of the workbench. That's why when you visit some technical workshops, you normally will see the workbench at the middle of the workshop. Yes, because that's what they want to actually put into consideration, that whichever way you come from, you can still work on your workbench. You don't need to fix it to the wall. Okay, having said this, I want to lead you to solving some practical questions from the ExamGuide app. Like I said before, the ExamGuide app is an app I recommend for you. If you are in junior secondary section, I recommend the ExamGuide app for you. Use it to prepare yourself for basic examination, because the more you prepare, the more you see this question, the more you get accustomed to them, the more you master them, the more you improve. So let's go to the ExamGuide app and pick out questions as regards what we've just learned concerning workbenches. Okay, so let's navigate through the app. A bench vise is used for dash jobs. Option A, boring. B, checking. C, filling. D, hammering. E, holding. Of course, a bench vise is specifically used for holding jobs. It's a holding tool. So the right option here is option E. Okay, so let's go further to check which of the following is used to hold a work during planning operations. I want you to answer this one by yourself. following what we have done. I've discussed with you. I've discussed bench stop. I've discussed um, the vice, the well, the clamps. So which one exactly is used for holding work during blending? Of course, you don't need to go more on it. The bench stop is the answer for that question. Alright, so having said this, please I encourage you to practice more on this. Thank you.